Welcome, everyone, to Congregation Va-Dor's Touch of Torah, this 1st of November, 2022. You're with Congregation Va-Dor and Rabbi Barry Silver, giving us a rational view of Torah. And this week's parasha is Lech Lecha, the third parasha of Genesis.
According to the Torah, God did choose to make a covenant with Abraham as the first Jew. And many people wonder, why was he chosen? What did he do to merit that incredible honor of being the first person to enter into a covenant where God would be his God and the Jews, his descendants, would be God's people? The rabbis have struggled with this. Some of them, most of them, especially the Orthodox, will tell you it was because he was willing to sacrifice his son. He was willing to go all the way and kill him because of faith in God. And he only stopped at the very end when God said no and provided a ram caught in a thicket. But he was ready to kill his son. Modern Jews don't think that was such a good thing for him to do. We don't agree that merits some kind of special reward. We would say that merits condemnation. Blind faith in voices in your head telling you to kill is one of the worst transgressions of religion. So modern Jews look to another action by Abraham. And it wasn't just that he made promises. It was that he acted. It was what he did that warranted this blessing. When God was going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, it's rather interesting that unlike when God said he was going to kill Abraham's son, Abraham objected to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, these were evil cities. Wickedness abounded. And so you might say, well, I guess they had it coming, as opposed to Abraham's son, who was faultless. He did nothing wrong. Abraham argues on behalf of the wicked people of Sodom and Gomorrah and is silent about his own son. But we do look at the story of Sodom and Gomorrah and think that is a selfless act. He's willing to challenge God in order to seek justice and fairness. He does not bend to any authority, even the ultimate authority, if he thinks it's not just. That, my friends, is a much better role model. And that has been the traditional role of the Jews over the centuries and the millennia. We stand up to any authority in order to pursue fairness and justice. The Brit, or the covenant that Abraham establishes with God in the Torah, bears remarkable resemblance to the covenants that were made at that time in the Assyrian Empire and the Babylonian Empire, which historians believe were the dominant empire at the time that the story of Abraham was written. In these covenants, it was a lord and a vassal, and then the serfs. The lord would make a covenant with the vassals. First, he would identify himself and identify his superiority and the inferiority of the vassal and the vassal's allegiance, and vow to obey the Lord. And even the same word, Lord, is used. So in this covenant, you could say the Ten Commandments is also viewed as one of these Assyrian type covenants. God says, I am the Lord your God. I brought you out of Egypt. I created the earth. I did these things. Without me, you'd be nothing. So first he establishes the relationship of a lord and a vassal. And then he lays out the terms of the agreement. If you obey me, and if you do these things, and if you provide me with fighters who will fight and die in my name, I've got your back. I'll protect you. How did the Assyrians do that? Well, the king would form an allegiance with many of the vassals. And then if somebody went after one of the vassals, the king would organize the others and protect him. So the king could make good on his promise. Also, the Lord would provide for the vassals and provide them food and sustenance and watch out for them. And he would also lead the confederation into battle. If there was a threat from the outside, he would gather everyone together and lead the charge to try to prevent them from being wiped out by some other people. So it spells out, here's your obligations in the 10 Commandments, or in the case of Abraham here, it's obedience. Don't have any other gods. Follow me. Don't worship in this particular way. And have blind faith. Be willing to sacrifice even your son. And then God says, because you did this, you will be rewarded and blessed. How will you be blessed? Well, in the vassal-lord relationship, usually the vassal is blessed with protection, with food, with well-being. In the case with God and the Jewish people, the Jews were blessed if they obeyed with the land of Israel. They were guaranteed a homeland. God would fight the battles for them. And they would also be blessed with lots of children, as we saw in the video, and with prosperity. The rain would fall at the right time, the crops would grow. They would scare the heck out of their enemies. It even goes into some grisly detail about them defeating and destroying their enemies, and they would live happily ever after. So that's the covenant that was established with Abraham. One other thing that's very important, Abraham rejected the religion of his father. Okay, he was the original iconoclast in the literal meaning of the word. An icon, of course, is an idol or a god, and class means to break. An iconoclast is someone who breaks tradition. He sets the world on a new course. He takes the sacred cows and he obliterates the prior status quo and starts a new way of thinking. That's an iconoclast. That's exactly what Abraham did. He literally smashed his father's idols and said, this doesn't make any sense. These idols have no power. Let's follow this invisible power that that was called many different names. So Jews ever since have been the iconoclasts. We break mindless traditions, and we are willing to stand up to any authority in the pursuit of kindness and peace and justice. Now here, Abraham establishes a new way of thinking for his people. It's a step up. Prior to that, they believed that these idols had special powers and that there were powers that governed all the different forces of nature. They viewed nature as very chaotic. They viewed humanity as very chaotic. There's all these different people from different tribes and different nations and different languages, and they're fighting against each other. And there's all these different powers and forces, and they had no idea how to tame them all or understand them. Abraham took a step in the right direction. It wasn't the final step. It wasn't the view that we have today, a rational view that makes sense today, but it was a step up. He said this: it's not that there's all these forces competing with each other, and it's not that people are all bound and destined to warfare and to kill each other. That's not it. There's something better. There's a higher purpose. We're all interconnected. We're all one. And the Lord that we worship is not the God of the Hebrews or the Babylonians. This God, unlike the ones before that, was the God of everything and everyone, the entire cosmos. And in that way, he gave people a vision of unity and of harmony. And that vision that he had is really what separates the Jews from others, which is the Shema, is indicating that this power that governs the universe is one. And it was believed in by Albert Einstein. But unlike people of blind faith, he had faith that everything was one, but he wanted to back it up with evidence. And he did to some extent with his equation E equals mc squared. He unified forces that seemed to be diverse, energy and mass and light and gravity, and he unified them so that they could be explained as one interconnected universe. He spent the rest of his life trying to come up with a unified field theory because things that operated on a micro level, the atoms and the electrons and the protons, didn't square with the way everything else works. So he said, there's got to be something even bigger than E equals mc squared. There's got to be something that's even more accurate that will unite all the forces of nature. And because of his faith, and also because of his belief that faith should be grounded in reason, he spent the rest of his life looking for it, never found it. And now today, an army of scientists have taken over the search, and they're in search of the unified field theory. It's the holy grail of science. But Einstein and Carl Sagan and the Jewish prophets were all onto something, that everything we see around us is all interconnected. And based on science, we now know that it is true. That's really the import, I believe, of this passage. Also, Abraham was willing to follow his heart and to leave his homeland. He left his home, his birthplace, his philosophy. He did not know where he was going. He was not told where he was going to end up. He was not sure of the characteristics of God. But what he did do, he did follow his heart and was willing to risk the unknown in order to embark on a journey of self-discovery. And that's a beautiful lesson too. We should not be afraid to leave our conventional thinking behind and to explore something that resonates within our heart. As Jews, we of course are grounded in Jewish tradition, but each one of us is a descendant of Abraham. And therefore we should also question, challenge, and see where our heart and our mind leads us. That's the lesson. And I would have said all of that this Friday, but I don't get enough time. We're restrained because the service, we'd like it to be somewhat curtailed, so around an hour or so. But that's the lengthier explanation of Abraham. Now, of course, you realize if you were to hear from different rabbis, they would have a very, very different take on it. And most of them would consider what I say to be heresy.
Even before this conversation came up, it's been on my mind. I would, as we come into this sacred space, I would like for us both and all to be able to come into it with what we have and not feel like we have to win the other one over. And I do find, I've often said, a rabid atheist is exactly like a rabid previous smoker. They're not pleasant to be around. The fact that I believe should not keep you and I from having a conversation, nor should I feel when I leave that you were trying to convince me otherwise. That's my own opinion.
That's it. That's very interesting. You remind me of the quote by Barry Goldwater, and I'm not sure exactly how it goes, but he said something like, moderation in pursuit of justice is no virtue, and extremism in pursuit of truth is no vice. And I kind of adhere to that. So I believe that absolutely I'm trying to win people over and change their minds about certain things. If people agree with me, that's fine. But if somebody believes in things that are antithetical to Judaism, or they believe in things that are going to make this world worse instead of better, the job of the rabbi is to speak out and to try to convince them otherwise. And it was the great Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel who said the whole purpose of religion should be to nudge us from our comfort zone. That's a really valuable thing. If we're comfortable in our thinking and we don't question anything or want to change anything, we're just comfortable, then we just exist. We don't grow, we don't change. In order to really grow, you need to challenge beliefs. Do they make sense? Is this working? Is this true? It's been said for thousands of years, but is it valid? Does it help us? And so I see my role, well, not just my role, I see the role of any spiritual leader to challenge the beliefs of everyone who's out there and to get them to re-examine all of their views through the eyes of reason and through the eyes of love. Now, many ministers, all they want to do is they want to knock down your beliefs based on the mind and reason and replace it with blind faith. That, for many, many ministers, they see as their role, and they attack the use of reason and the rational mind. And you see this over and over again. What is rewarded? What gets you guaranteed into heaven in fundamentalist Christianity? It's blind faith. In fact, they say if you had the evidence, if you didn't need faith, if the evidence was there and you believed it because it was obvious, that's not to your credit. They believe what is to your credit is to believe something without evidence, to believe something that makes no sense, but you just have faith in God. Now, think about this. If you're trying to brainwash someone and you're trying to indoctrinate them, that is a really good strategy. Convince the person that the rational mind can't be trusted, that any doubt comes from the devil, and that all they should do is place blind faith in what? In you. That's a prescription for disaster. And we've seen that disaster in many forms of organized religion. So, yeah, I see my job, and maybe people see it differently, to try to nudge people out of their comfort zone and to challenge conventional beliefs. And I believe that the use of reason is the best way to challenge beliefs that we have that aren't real and to come closer to the truth. We're not there yet, but Judaism believes in emet v'tzedek, truth and righteousness. And therefore, if there's a belief that people have and it's not true, we don't do any favors by just leaving it alone. We need to challenge that belief. And not just rabbis. That's the role of the Jewish people. We're supposed to be a light to the nations and a kingdom of priests. That, to me, is the role of every single Jewish person. And again, not everybody agrees with my take on Judaism. And many, many, many rabbis will totally disagree with it. Anybody else?
Albert, go ahead.
Yes, Rabbi, some would say this is radical. This reminds me of a great community organizer many years ago, and because he stressed and illustrated what is radical. Radical, if you look at the root word, if you look at the origins of radical, the radical means get to the radish or to the root, to the truth of the matter. And that is, so yes, you're getting to the truth of our faith.
Very, very well said. Yes, the word radical is related to the word radish and also radius and to radiate. It means to go back to the very beginning and not get lost in all of the fluff and all of the traditions and customs that have grown around it. That's why I say to go back to the beginning is to go back to Abraham and to challenge the status quo. See, many people think, oh, to be Jewish, we should just follow all this tradition. That's not what Abraham did. He didn't just follow all the tradition. He charted a course that he wasn't sure where it would end up. And I suggest this, if you want to have a really exciting approach to Judaism, they say that you should always be willing to challenge at least once any idea that you have, because it might be wrong. If you really want to follow an exciting approach to Judaism, try starting from scratch, using your rational mind and not believing anything because, well, the Torah says it, the prayer book says it. Just approach it from a rational point of view and see where it leads you and see where you end up. And my thinking is this: we should place our faith in Jewish ideals: peace, love, justice, truth, righteousness, rahmanas, compassion. These things are worthy of our faith. Can I prove that these ideals will make the world a better place with mathematical certainty? No, but it kind of seems obvious. And if we put this into practice, these ideals become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The other stuff, God wrote the Torah, God's going to reward you if you do the right thing, Noah built an ark. These things, if they're not accurate, can get in your way and lead you down a black hole. My opinion is that Orthodox Judaism has jumped into the abyss and gone down this black hole. They say God wrote the Torah, it's all true. God has a covenant with the Jews. God ordered us to commit genocide, and evolution didn't really happen. This is jettisoning in the rational mind, and it's sending us down into a black hole. And it's actually causing us, instead of to be a people of truth, a people of falsehood. Now, obviously, this antagonizes people. It gets some people angry. But, Ptolemy was believed for 1,500 years. Then a guy named Galileo came along and said, nah, it didn't really work that way. The earth is not in the center. It's the earth actually goes around the sun, and people were really mad and angry. And Galileo was threatened with torture for teaching it. Giordano Bruno was burned at the stake. And challenging the status quo is a little dicey. But I think it's a really exciting way to practice Judaism. And I think if everybody uses their rational mind, imagine all the people who would be making discoveries and new revelations and new insights. It would be really helpful to our people. And that is a radical approach, going back to, as you say, the roots, the beginning of Judaism. And really, if you think about it, what made Abraham really amazing is that he was willing to follow his heart and his dreams because he perceived that there was something better. And the word that is used for this passage is Lech Lecha. Lech Lecha means go forth, but it also can be translated Lech, go. Lecha means to you. It could mean forward or in advance, but it could also mean to you. Go within yourself and see what's there, and then follow your dream and your heart. That's a radical approach, but it's a spiritual approach. And I think that's an important lesson from this wonderful passage of Lech Lecha.
Rabbi, this has been great this evening. And you're talking about unifying forces. The modern state of Israel, the modern marvel that it is, took American General Mickey Marcus to bring the tribes together to unified modern Israel and an IDF that take on the Arabs. So, I mean, that's the flip side of that.
What you say is so important, that when Israel is attacked and their soldiers are fighting to defend Israel, they stand shoulder to shoulder. They do not ask, are you a Sephardic Jew or an Ashkenazic Jew? Do you believe in God? Are you Orthodox? Are you Reform? They do not ask that. They stand together as one for the state of Israel. And that is one of the reasons why the Jews have been so successful in Israel. But there's cracks in that. We have some people in Israel who are saying, well, you're not really Jewish because you don't believe these things, or you don't really have the right to exercise control over your denomination. We don't recognize this denomination. We're only going to exercise, grant rights to this denomination. That is a very dangerous thing. I understand the motivation because, like I was saying, they believe that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, you're not really Jewish and you're diluting the religion. I get it, but it's very dangerous. And what we need to do, we need to build bridges with all Jews and the ultra-Orthodox, the atheists of all denominations. There's a different strategy that people suggest. One strategy to do that is don't mention the differences. Don't say anything about it. Just hide them, and then nobody will realize that we don't agree. That doesn't work too well. I think the way to do it is to say, hey, okay, we have differences, but that's what makes us Jewish. Jewish people have rational minds, and let's discuss some of these differences, and let's agree on what's important. Fighting for Israel, fighting for truth and justice, protecting the downtrodden. Let's agree on these things. And then let's get together and let's share our disagreement about other things. That's how you arrive at truth. Sadly, that is almost never, ever, ever done. Most people believe, not just Jews, that if somebody disagrees with you, that means that you need to get angry with them, or that's a barrier. He doesn't agree with me about this. I guess he's my enemy or my opponent. That type of thinking needs to go. If all we do is like and love people who think the way we do, it's very shallow, and we're just using self-induced indoctrination, just surrounding ourselves with our own ideas. So that's an important thing, I believe, that we should do. And as Jews, if we can bring Jews together, that's a really good thing. And we do it at Va-Dor to some extent. We have people of different backgrounds. I'm always trying to get the Orthodox to come and mix it up a little bit. And I'll keep trying.